Welcome back. Join today's conversation on any of our social media platforms. On Twitter, we're at Biz Morning, or you can follow the main channel as well at Channels TV, or follow me at Harriet Agbin. You can also send a mail to businessmorning@channelstv.com. Well, we're hoping to get Mr. Gabriel Idahosa, the CEO of UHY Maji & Co. in the studio. Probably he's also been affected by the fuel scarcity, but he should be here in a moment. But joining me now in the studio is the Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of ME Consulting Limited, Mr. Victor Eromosele. Mr. Eromosele, good morning, and thank you so much for coming in. Of course, I was going to ask you, first of all, how did you manage? How did you, manage through the weekend and, of course, manage to get to the studio this morning?
One of those things, I call this transition week energy paralysis, so you got to find your way one way or the other, and I got here. I think that's the main thing.
That's the main thing. But looking at the situation as it is, no petroleum products, of course, there was also an issue at the Shiroro power plant over the weekend where there was a system collapse, so to speak, and then the amount of megawatts being distributed from there to Abuja and environs actually dropped. Now that we're talking about this issue the way it is, how soon should Nigeria begin to think about diversifying its energy generation or even production base as an alternative to what we have right now?
We should have done that many years ago, I guess. We should have. If you think about what's happening now, I think I should give you some backdrop. Actually, what's happening now, the total power generated, I hear, is about a third, 30% of normal. Normal being 4 gigawatts. Now it's about 1.3 gigawatts. And that is low, very low indeed. And part of what it is, you talked about the Shiroro one, but the other main reason is that there's a Pinkerton strike, which is affecting several gas plants. You need these gas plants to supply the various GENCOs and generating sets, and so they're not getting enough of that. And the result is what we have now. For how long it will last, I think the authorities are in a better position to tell. So it's quite a tough week for us. But in terms of alternatives, I think there are lots of alternatives. Shiroro is a good one because that's hydro. Hydro has a huge potential. Sometimes I wonder why we're not doing enough hydros. But there are lots of plans on paper on hydro, and I think that hydro, as you do know, is renewable because water. We should do more of renewable energy. Hydro is one which Nigeria is well positioned to do, and we're not doing enough of that. But the other renewable, which I'm very passionate with, it's solar. I actually have a charity that runs things on solar. We publish the Go Solar Journal, which basically educates people on what's happening in the renewable energy space. And I can tell you that there's huge opportunity, and you start wondering, why is Nigeria not doing solar? South Africa, for example, has 500 megawatts. Just think about that. Over 500 megawatts of solar. It's among the top 10 producers of solar energy in the world. So what is Nigeria waiting for?
But why do you think that, the federal government, the federal government is being shy to take this bold step? And why not even the private sector?
The beauty of it is that there's a lot of initiative on the ground. And actually, I don't know if you're aware of this, there's actually a target. Nigeria, we're very good at setting targets for everything. By 2025, 10% of energy will be generated in Nigeria from renewable. Right? And so there should be plans for that. And reviewing the plans, I can tell you that as I speak, there are at least 10 or more projects on the ground, all related to what I call the solar dreams. But I think the most prospective is the one by Total. Total usually is in fossil fuel, and here you are, courtesy of an acquisition they made internationally recently. They are now equally into solar business, and they are promoting it very aggressively. It will interest you to know that 3 plants, one in Katsina, another in Nasarawa, another in Ekiti, all 3 will generate some 430 megawatts when built. That is what I call large-scale solar. And we need to do more of that.
But then what's the timeline? Because we're looking at, beginning to encourage renewable energy, and we're looking at doing it very quickly. But what's the timeline to have this, this project come on stream?
You do know that if it's a private sector like Total, within 3 years, you always get most of their projects on once they get started. Once they take the final investment decision, usually within 3 years, they will get the projects done. For the others, it's a different ballgame. But you equally do know that on the federal government side, so I've told you about the private sector, on the federal government side, you have the Light Up Nigeria project. I like that. When light up means light up rural Nigeria. This is something we should have done 10, 20 years ago. Solar is actually the best way. Do you imagine? Throughout the night, I ran my generator, to.
No, that's you're fortunate because not a lot of people have petrol to put in their cars.
To have a semblance of civilization, I had to, I had to run my gen. But could you imagine, for example, if I had, which I intend to, have some solar on my roof, and I had some emergency light bulbs, and so my fans could run, everything could run except probably my huge refrigerator and my air conditioner, and my computers can run, I can charge my phones. That would be good, and all you need is solar panel, your inverter, and a bank of batteries.
But how expensive are those equipment? The solar panel, for instance, I hear goes for quite a huge amount of money. And so you're talking about spending huge X amount on the panels, another amount on inverters, and another amount on batteries. How many Nigerians can begin to afford this? Maybe that's the reason why it's not really common stream.
Nigerians can afford cars. I think it's cheaper than cars. I think
but not every Nigerian can afford a car.
But with cars, you have to fuel them, fuel the cars. This one is once and for all. God will not charge you a fee for using the sun. And the sun is always there. So if it's properly installed, you could benefit significantly. I told you, South Africa generates over 500 megawatts of power. Nigeria currently generates very, very little, less than 0.1% of total power in Nigeria today is generated from there. But we have our aggressive targets, so let there be plans backing these targets. I like the targets. 2025 is only 10 years from now, and if we can pursue those targets, I think that would be great. And then I was talking earlier about the urgent light of Nigeria. It's in 16 states, mostly rural, which is quite good, which basically means that most rural communities will have their own little substations, where you have the solar panels all lined up there, and then they can have their 1 or 2 bulbs and have a semblance of civilization in their houses. I think that is great. Once we have that done, and then that will be good. To augment, of course, the American-African initiative by President Barack Obama, which you heard about. It's a $7 billion project, which they call the Power Initiative for Africa. It's equally on solar. And that is good. We've had 1 or 2 very good examples, and one was in Port Harcourt, River State, around the outskirts of Port Harcourt, where a young man actually came out with this award-winning project, and it's lighting up hundreds of houses using the solar model. So it can be done.
But that's on the federal government level now. What about on the state level? Have some states made any effort towards looking at this area of clean energy, so to speak? Because we're having a serious drop in gas supply, and the issues now with the power plants and the rest of it. Have states begun to look at the option of actually towing that line of introducing clean energy?
With states, most of this intend to be federal, but one state that has always been different from all states, at least when it comes to power, has been Lagos. Lagos loves what I call energy autonomy. And recently, I think was it a couple of weeks ago, there was the commissioning of these 5 megawatt solar projects to supply rural schools and rural hospitals. I think it's brilliant, and there's all kudos. I wish more states can do that.
When you say most states can do that, do they have the capacity? Because looking at Lagos State, we have a huge population of over 21 million.
Vision. Once you have a vision, you have the drive and passion, you can always achieve whatever you want to.
It's one thing for you to have the vision and you have the mission. Implementation is another thing entirely.
Absolutely. That is where drive comes in.
Drive from which aspect now? Yes, it's a state government project, but can the private sector also lend a hand.
There's a room for PPP. Total is lending a hand. So we should be saying other IOC is going to imitate Total. You know, can even the NOC, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, for example, as you do know, they equally have an initiative there. They call it the RED project. You know, the RED, which is Renewable Energy Department or Division of NNPC, is actually into that. But they're into biomass, you know, how you could, you know, generate some energy out of cassava and things like that, you know. I don't know where we are on that, but I do know that even the state oil company was supporting that at one time. I don't know the exact state of that. So it's all hands on deck. In Nigeria, there's no shortage of ideas, but there's probably shortage of drive and getting the desired results. And because we are a huge and populous country, that too is part of the problem. And as a huge and populous country, we're growing at a rate of something like, 4 million new people join us every year. Just think about that. And that's like the population of many small European countries. So, so how do you provide for that? And so you have to keep infrastructure and all these facilities, keep in pace. So that makes it. And of course, the economic growth in Nigeria, which we've been talking about lately, has been quite significant. So it's just taking some time, but I'm sure someday we'll get our act together.
And for this, transition government, this is a transition week. We have an incoming government, I beg your pardon. On Friday, we have the formal inauguration of Muhammadu Buhari as president. Going forward now, what aspects or how quickly do you think they should begin to focus on renewable energy, clean energy, so to speak, to light up Nigeria?
From the scratch, they should start immediately. It's really, in Nigeria, we have focused too much on fossil fuel, which is gas supply, and there's so much problems in that gas chain, once in a while. You heard about the Trans-Forcados pipeline being tampered with. I'm glad to hear that it's been fixed now. You have the ELP, which equally supplies Ghana some gas, and there have been issues around that. So that emphasizes the need for us to diversify away from, we need to diversify away from the current dependence on fossil fuel. So you clearly need hydro in greater scales than we have now. You clearly need solar and even wind. And then you equally have what they call waste, and I hear there are 1 or 2 such projects in Nigeria now, which is very exciting. It's called waste to electricity. So instead of just dumping your waste and you can convert that to electricity, I think that is good news, and that is where Nigeria should be. And then Nigeria generates a lot of waste, so if we can generate a lot of waste to electricity, and then God is prepared to give us sunshine, has given us sunshine. In fact, a study shows that we generate 60% more sunshine than Germany. But the Germans produce something like 3-point-something megawatts of power, which is like the whole of Nigeria's power from sun. So that's quite a lot happening out there.
Mr. Eromosele, thank you so much for joining me on the program and sharing your perspectives with us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Business Morning continues in just a moment. Please stay with us.